The EPA undoes its climate endangerment finding. President Trump's order on homelessness, plus Governor Braun on READI, and more. From the television studios at WFYI, it's Indiana Week in Review for the week ending August 1st, 2025.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.
This week, the Environmental Protection Agency wants to undo its finding that climate change harms people and eliminate greenhouse gas standards for cars and trucks. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Rebecca Thiel reports EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin officially announced the proposal at a commercial truck dealership in Indianapolis.
The 2009 endangerment finding serves as the scientific and legal basis for many of EPA's rules that limit greenhouse gas emissions from things like cars and coal plants. Zeldin says reversing the finding would be the largest deregulatory action in the country's history. He says greenhouse gas emissions from cars and trucks have gone down in recent decades, and Americans shouldn't be forced to buy expensive electric vehicles.
There are other nations that continue to increase emissions, and all of us strangulating our own economy, regulating the heck out of American families and American industries.
Former EPA officials and climate advocates say reversing the finding will lead to more premature deaths as well as increased risks from heat waves and flooding.
How will this EPA move help the average American? It's the first question for our Indiana Week in Review panel. Democrat Lara Beck. Republican Whitley Yates. John Schwantes, host of Indiana Lawmakers, and Niki Kelly, editor-in-chief of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. I'm Indiana Public Broadcasting State House Bureau Chief Brandon Smith. Lara Beck, is this about helping the average person or helping big businesses?
Well, I think this is about helping the Trump administration dismantle every positive climate legislation and climate policy that the Obama administration had done, as well as the Biden administration. So it's going back to pulling out of the Paris Accords, dismantling the Inflation Reduction Act and all the pieces there. What's ironic to me is that they held this event in Indiana, which has probably some of the worst environmental quality rankings in the country. The metro area alone has some of the worst air quality in the country out of metro areas. This last week, we were rated 48th in terms of quality of life, in terms of a CNBC study. And what I find so disheartening about this is that the MAGA Republicans have essentially taken away the societal contract of we're going to leave the world a better place for the next generation. I mean, the activities that have gone on with the work from the Obama administration and the Biden administration are designed for a long-term effect. And the fact that they have just abandoned facts, they have followed Donald Trump off the cliff, it's incredibly frustrating, but it's also incredibly eye-opening that they're willing to do this at the cost of the future for the future generations.
When you're talking about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, why is that a bad thing? Why is that something that needs to be undone?
I think they want to push back regulations to allow for businesses to be able to do the things that they want to do. And when you look at what's been happening in Indiana, specifically like in Petersburg, Indiana, where you have an AES plant that's switching to natural gas, they're not doing so because the EPA forced them. They're doing so because it's cleaner and it's more efficient. And so what you really have is the market regulating and doing things that the EPA was once forcing on their own. And so I think the thought or the idea behind this, in my opinion or my view, is that what they really want to do is just continue to spur that innovation so that companies like AES can continue to do things that we've been seeing. And it hasn't been because they've been forced. It is honestly just innovation within the market.
I want to build off of that because specifically when you think about some of the regulations on cars and trucks, like CAFE standards and things like that, the automotive industry does not switch on a dime. They think in 10, 20, 30-year plans. They were already working on this stuff and aiming towards, again, and we've seen it, reducing, miles per gallon in vehicles and electrifying more and more. We've seen some of them step back from the electrification of vehicles, but is this, getting rid of this EPA rule going to dramatically change what the auto industry is doing?
Well, the endangerment finding, which I think dates back to 2008, 2009, yeah. It had been widely accepted over time. Now, initially, there was a lot of litigation. It was a lot of pushback, people saying the sky was going to fall, industry would collapse. but it had become widely accepted. And I think became sort of standard operating procedure, which is another thing business operators like, which is knowing what they're dealing with. They may not like it, but if I have consistency and know what's going to happen 5 years from now and 10 years from now, and it's not an ever-changing regulatory landscape, there's value in that. So that's part of the issue that I think is people find unsettling here. Also, let's stipulate that regulation can cost money, but we do it for various reasons. I mean, we now abate asbestos, which is a problem. We have determined that tobacco and smoke is a danger. We have, formaldehyde and other sorts of materials that just lead out of gasoline. That came with a cost as well. So at some point, you just can't say, take the shackles off of business and let it go crazy. Or maybe you can. To what end?
Isn't that the end goal here? Deregulation on a level we've literally never seen in this country.
One more thing, how can you regulate the dye in candy and so forth? And so that's something you can choose to consume. I can either have the red dye or the purple dye or whatever dye is the bad dye, or not. But with air, if I want to breathe, I'm kind of stuck with what I get.
So it's regulation when I like it, and no regulation when I don't?
The inconsistency is tough. And you brought up what I was going to bring up. Like, we're banning food dye, but it's okay if, we pollute the air kind of thing. Now, I don't think any of these automakers are going to reverse course and go back to, once we're up to this point.
Because that's not where the marketplace is.
Right, exactly. We're up to this point. They're not going to go backwards, but there is a question about whether they could have been pushing to improve even more and whether that will be worth their while now.
But it's also a question of, American companies can't just measure themselves against other American companies, whether it's the auto industry or anything else. If European or Asian automakers are doing things pushing further in terms of that innovation.
Well, obviously Donald Trump wants them to import more of our vehicles, right?
Right.
And so that's another thing that they're going to have to consider, is that they're in a global economy and not just in the United States.
Yeah. All right, some local housing advocates are critical of the Trump administration's recent executive order saying that local governments should remove people experiencing homelessness from public places. Mary Morgan is with Heading Home. She says the approach conflates homelessness with mental health issues, substance use, and crime.
There obviously can be overlap between all of those things, but the condition of homelessness does not always coincide with these other things. And then it doesn't address the fundamental cause of homelessness, which is a lack of housing options.
The executive order said placing people with mental illnesses into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order. But Morgan says there aren't enough beds to do this in her locality, Monroe County. According to the 2024 count, the county had 456 people experiencing homelessness, and about a third of them are unsheltered.
I would say a subset of unhoused folks who do need some serious intervention, that they aren't able to function in society. But again, who's making that determination?
The 2024 statewide count said 1 in 4 people experiencing homelessness had a serious mental illness. Whitley, is involuntary commitment as part of a homelessness reduction plan really all that viable?
I don't believe so. And I don't think that the solution is going to put handcuffs on people or put them in hospital gowns. That's not going to be the solution to homelessness, especially in a state like Indiana, where we have removed those long-term care facilities that we once had for those that have been mentally incapacitated or have mental health issues. Now, I have seen in this current administration, the Braun administration, that they have attempted to at least stabilize housing specifically for inmates who are coming out and being viable in society, and trying to provide through IHCDA some stable housing. But we have to get down to the root cause, and I don't believe that this is what it's going to do, this order.
I mean, an executive order from the president on this subject is only has so much force and effect. But clearly this is the head of the Republican Party, at least, saying this is what we should be doing. It really isn't what Indiana has been focused on. Do you think that's going to change because of this?
Well, I think it probably depends on how politically expedient the governor and his people think that is to make sense, right? I think that one of the challenges, I agree with Whitley. I think this is such a complex challenge, and there are so many factors that pull into this. And for all of the reasons that the person you were interviewing from Bloomington, Monroe County was talking about. But the other piece of the question I have is where, if you're going to put people into some type of emergency housing or hospital setting, where are they going to go, and what does that look like? And I think you get into a whole other host of issues when what we really need to be working on is we need to be working on income inequality. We need to be working on affordable housing, not just affordable housing for people who are homeless, but affordable housing for people who are working people. Education, healthcare,
and our one bad emergency away from being homeless themselves.
Exactly. And the other part too is I think when we think about people who are homeless, we think about people we see on a street or people we see in a camp. We're also not thinking about people who they're doubling up with family and friends because they couldn't make the rent, and now their credit is destroyed. And so where do they go next? And I think that is
or if you get one eviction on your record, good luck getting somewhere else to live.
Or you can't buy a car, or I mean, it becomes, or you go into medical debt. I mean, I think our society is not set up for people who are working middle class people, and what we're seeing is people. There's no safety net anymore, and this to me is just it's a political tool again to try and get us divided, so we aren't sitting around a table talking in a reasonable way about what makes sense and what we need to do.
So I'll ask the same question to you too, which is, does this change in any way what Indiana has been working on for a while and continues to work on?
I don't think so, only because the beds aren't there.
Yeah.
So it's not even an actual, we don't have the money to do that. We don't have the physical beds to do that. So it's almost like not even a conversation to have because we just don't have those resources available to help all these people. I do find it interesting, something else we need to tie in along with mental health and low wages is education.
Right.
And for whatever reason, people have pulled away from education. And I don't mean just a 4-year degree. I mean any sort of post-secondary education, whether it be licensing or other training or certifications. And we keep seeing that drop and drop and drop. And so that's another thing that a lot of these people could be helped with, training and education.
All right. Time now for viewer feedback. Each week we pose an unscientific online poll question. And this week's question is, should people experiencing homelessness who have mental illnesses be involuntarily committed? A, yes, or B, no. Last week we asked you whether state lawmakers should do more to help lower Hoosiers' utility bills. 94% of you say yes, 6% say no. If you'd like to take part in the poll, go to WFYI.org/IWIR and look for the poll. Well, Indiana Governor Mike Braun this week voiced support for the state's READI regional grant program intended to help finance economic development projects statewide. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Thomas Ouellette reports that's as the new 2-year state budget doesn't include a third round of the grants.
The first $500 million READI grant program launched in 2021 under then-Governor Eric Holcomb was paid for with federal COVID-19 funds. The second, awarded in 2024, was funded entirely with state money. During a Tuesday evening chat with Forge ECI, East Central Indiana's READI managing organization, Governor Mike Braun said he wanted to keep up the momentum the program created.
There are a lot more tools, and I think READI grant's a good one because it's based upon really giving a multiplier effect on what the state would invest in a community. So we'll keep that healthy and do more of it.
But a third round was not proposed in the budget passed in April. Braun did not give any details about when a third round would come or how it would be funded.
Niki Kelly, if the next state budget is rosier than the current one, and God knows we all hope it is, does READI make a comeback?
I honestly don't think so. I don't really have any. I mean, at least not in the format of $500 million that we've done before. And also a lot of the projects through READI 1, much less READI 2, are still working through the process. So I don't know if we're ready for another READI, so to speak. But also I just think they have so many other big needs in the state budget that we've been holding back. Not only we've been holding them back, or we've been just actively cutting them, that I'm not sure it would be a wise priority for lawmakers.
There was a version of READI, the Regional Cities Initiative created under Governor Mike Pence, that was a little bit, it was I think $120-something million.
From a tax amnesty program, so it wasn't like it was actually paid for.
Ongoing spending or anything like that. And so some form of this sort of regional economic development incentive has been around for a decade now. in some form, does READI continue in Indiana in the future?
I think in some form, for precisely the reason you mentioned, the notion of having regional development where the benefits of economic development and incentives can be spread throughout the state. Something is clearly part of the agenda of Mike Braun, for instance, who, if anything, was critical that too much economic development focus and spending was in certain areas on central Indiana. So this certainly fits with the mantra he has been putting forth from the campaign and beyond.
And also just the idea of counties and cities not having to compete with all of their neighbors.
There's a logic to it. And for all of those reasons, I think there will be an appetite to continue it in some way. Now, does it have a new name? Does it have less funding? I think it certainly will have less funding. But there's somewhere between the $100 million when it was made its debut and the $500 million.
$500 million twice.
That was, I think that caught everybody, you know, a little bit off guard, that there was a willingness to put that much into the hopper. So it will go on in some fashion, but at a reduced amount.
I think from a political standpoint, you're going to see something because big check presentations are very popular in an election year, particularly in 2028. So it would not surprise me if we see something. I also think that municipalities and local government, school districts are going to be really pushing back on the legislature because they're going to need something because of Senate Bill 1. I mean, you've already got some municipalities that are raising their wheel taxes so they can actually apply for community crossing grants. Those are grants that they have really come to rely on for their infrastructure. So I think from a political standpoint, they're going to have to do something because optics-wise, it looks good to have that check, but it also, you're going to have local governments who are going to start turning their ire on the legislature.
Well, in terms of politics and optics, that's how some things like that. I mean, the second $500 million, which just came from state dollars, was only really possible because the first $500 million was so popular across the board. Democrats, Republicans, local governments all over the place loved this thing. Niki kind of got to this too, but is something that's going to help something like this stay alive well into the future going to be that these projects are going to be happening for years and years and years because that's just how long it takes to do this?
I honestly think that's what's going to be able to keep them from issuing more money and why it's not in the budget now, because you have all of these projects in the pipeline and we're looking at the foundation, but we have not been able to see the viability of the programs yet. It hasn't hit our economy. And so being able to say, well, we have 10, 15 regional projects that are going to be happening over the next 5 years. Let's wait and see those come to fruition before we begin funding more of these projects.
Yeah, I think it's something like 65% of the first round of funding has gone out now. So not even 100% of the first $500 million. And then the second $500 million is in its earliest stages. And a lot of these projects, too, it's like, it's not the throw up a quick, you know, little building somewhere. I mean, it's huge housing projects. It's huge, you know, beautification plans that take time to literally build. Yeah, multiple phases.
I'm just glad people still appreciate a good old-fashioned check presentation, because in this day of electronic funds transfers, that just does, it may be efficient.
Trying to scan that in on my phone to the app is a little challenging, but if you can make it work.
It looks really good on a direct mail piece. Holding that big check.
EFTs, no.
All right, Indiana is revamping how it grades the quality of a school. And from WFYI's Education Desk, Eric Weddle reports the state is taking public comment on a new accountability system that could change how student success is measured for years to come.
The first draft of Indiana's new A to F school accountability system is now open for public feedback. The proposed model moves beyond test scores as the yardstick for quality. It adds skills for students like work ethic and career readiness. The system would track student progress at key grade levels from third grade through graduation. Secretary of Education Katie Jenner says the feedback from families and educators will be used to improve the plan.
The first draft is far from perfect, and people will have suggestions that we can take forward and make better.
Comments are due by August 22nd. A final version is expected by the end of this year.
John Schwantes, I love the idea of not relying so much just on tests. We just know that that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help learning. But how do you measure measure something like work ethic?
Those are tough when you look at communication skills and you look at the soft skills that we often talk so much about in this economy. I'm not sure how. We'll see what the final, once the public comment period is done, we'll see what they come up with. On the one hand, yes, it is tougher, and biases do enter into it because of an inherent subjectivity to it. But I guess the argument for it is that's the way the workplace is. When you're going to apply for a job or when somebody's recruiting, it may be, okay, thank you. I'm glad that your GPA was this, and I'm glad that you're, short of civil service, where there might be some specific guidelines. Otherwise, it's like, I really like the way you shook my hand or the way you look at me during the interview. And so in a way, this is trying to get at, will it be perfect? Probably not, but trying to get at those intangibles that effectively drive hiring in the workplace.
Yeah, Niki, sort of the same question.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, anything that moves past one metric to judge all students in all schools is improvement. Attendance can show work ethic, whether you're late, truancy, those can show work ethic.
But we also know there are so many things that go into to those too that aren't sometimes the students.
The whole idea of having these work-based learning, internship, that's something that you could objectively, put in there. Whether you're taking the ACT, the SAT, those kinds of tests. So there are some things, and I think it's a really good move, and I'm excited to see, because like I said, we were using basically one, maybe two metrics, so anything is an improvement, I think.
Is this, this is, they acknowledge, this is early in the process. We saw the same thing with the high school diploma requirements.
Yeah.
They came out with the first version, everybody went, no, this is terrible. They said, okay, and it looked very different by the time we got to the end. But is at least this the right direction?
Well, I just would like to take a step back, because as we were listening to this story and as it was coming out, I can't tell you how many times I've sat on programs like this, and there's a new way we're going to measure success in Indiana. I mean, I think there's probably, my son is going to be a senior in high school, and I think throughout his entire educational career, we have had multiple ways of how we measure success. Yeah. And I think what ends up happening...
And multiple different tests we're using to measure that success.
Tests, and then we change the name. And I think what has ultimately happened is we get data, we don't like the data, we move the goalpost. Then we get the data from that. We're not really sure about that. Then we move the goalpost again. And so I feel like we have just in Indiana been in a constant state of flux with education policy. And it's not benefiting kids. It's not benefiting parents. We know it's not benefiting the school districts and the teachers. I do think that Katie Jenner is really practical and very good at what she does, and I certainly hope they're listening to her. And maybe some of this is based on some of the work that she's done. But from my vantage point, it's just been a constant source of change, and it just creates chaos for kids. It just creates chaos for everybody.
That's not an uncommon opinion, even among some Republicans at the State House, who've said, hey, we're doing these bills every single year. We need to take a couple years and see if it's working. But at the same time, if the current system isn't working, we can't help but try and make it better, right?
Right. And I think that the issue is wanting there to be a singular point of success. Because I think we will all say that some of the new generation entering the workforce could use some of these soft skills. So I think this is actually going to be able to be proactive towards making sure that the future generations are able to at least interact and be able to have what is necessary when it comes to interpersonal relationship and soft skills. What I do think is important is that we're not basing teacher salaries off how well they do without the KPIs to be able to measure. And so I want to make sure that I'm looking at the teachers. I'm a mom of a fourth grader going into the fifth grade here next month. And so I am excited to see that we're having the conversation, but let's make sure that it is looked at thoroughly. And I think Dr. Jenner does a great job in making data-driven decisions.
I agree with that. All right, finally, the Indiana State Fair begins this weekend, and this year's Taste of the Fair foods include pickle fried Oreos, a cotton candy lemon shake-up, and Little Debbie honey bun burgers. That's a burger between two Little Debbie honey buns. Lara Beck, Lara Beck, what food are you looking forward to most this year?
I just go straight to the Dairy Barn for a vanilla milkshake.
And
very basic.
The special milkshake this year at the Dairy Barn is the key lime pie milkshake. What fair food are you looking forward to?
You know, as I'm trying to make myself healthy again, I don't know if I should divulge this, but I'm always excited to get that dipped corn, those Ben pretzels. And I think you have sold me on trying the deep fried pickled Oreo after you said
it's so good.
So good.
It's so good.
It may be one of those egg rolls you were talking about.
Yeah. John?
Having a ribeye sandwich and a milkshake. I'll see you in the dairy bar.
That's a classic fair food.
I'm in for the new trio of little funnel cakes that are Italian themed. I love it.
Yeah, cannoli, Italian wedding cake, and tiramisu. So I tried one of these egg rolls from the folks that brought you the Godfather egg roll last year, which was spaghetti and meatballs in an egg roll. This year it's a chicken Philly filling in the egg roll. The whole egg roll is then dipped in a hot honey lemon pepper buffalo sauce and drizzled with ranch.
Wow.
I don't like half of those things on their own, but that was one of my favorite things I've eaten at the State Fair in my life. I recommend everyone, and it's a local catering and food truck company who does it. A lot of the local vendors have those Taste of the Fair foods, so never a bad time to go out and eat.
You let me deep fry.
No, absolutely not. My doctor's appointment was a couple months ago. My next one's in several months. I'm fine.
I can make that coffee mug taste good for you if you give me the deep fry.
That's Indiana Week in Review for this week. Our panel is Democrat Lara Beck, Republican Whitley Yates, John Schwantes of Indiana Lawmakers, and Niki Kelly of the Indiana Capital Chronicle. You can find Indiana Week in Review's podcast and episodes at WFYI.org/IWIR or on the PBS app. I'm Brandon Smith of Indiana Public Broadcasting. Join us next time, because a lot can happen in an Indiana week. The views expressed are solely those of the panelists.
Indiana Week in Review is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations.